Army Brats. We're on chapter 17. Oh, I love that design, Sophia exclaimed. She grabbed Charlotte's hand so she could check out her nails close up. Thanks, Charlotte said, trying to smile. It had been a long week and it was only Thursday. You use tape? Mari asked as she leaned over and admired the bronze, sage, and hot pink geometric shapes on Charlotte's nails. Yes, Charlotte said. It was raining outside and the drops splattered against the big windows next to them. The gray of the day mirrored Charlotte's mood, and she wished she were home, curled up with a book instead of under the harsh lights of the crowded cafeteria. Sophia grinned. We're learning your secrets. Well, not completely, Mari said, wrinkling her nose. She held out nails that looked as though they'd met with a mud puddle. I tried to do a splattered look, but the colors mixed and it just looks dirty. I think you have to let each coat dry in between, Charlotte advised. She poked her fork into her salad and pushed it around. It seemed especially unappetizing today. Oh, that makes sense, Mari said. I actually texted to ask you about it last night, but you never got back to me. What were you doing? Now both girls looked at Charlotte, who gulped a little. She and Rosie had been playing with dolls and having so much fun, Charlotte hadn't even thought to check her phone. But she certainly couldn't tell Mari and Sophie that. My phone died. Sorry, she mumbled. Hi, Jen Sebastian said. Charlotte had been so busy fending off Mari's questions that she hadn't seen Jen approach and hadn't had time to prepare for what had turned into a daily assault. And as usual, Jen did not waste any time seeking gossip. Charlotte, how's your brother? Fine, thanks, Charlotte said, taking a big bite of salad so she'd have an excuse not to talk. Well, he'd better not get into too much trouble, Jen said knowingly, because I heard Chase saying that he was going to spook with him one of the worms we're dissecting in science next week. Charlotte crunched down hard on the tasteless lettuce, hating everything about what Jen was saying. If it was true, it was mean and awful. If it was just a rumor, it was still mean and awful. And Charlotte was really tired of mean, awful things happening to her brother. And then getting tossed into her life at lunchtime. He shouldn't be such an easy target, Sophia said, shaking her head dismissively. Charlotte thought of what she could say to defend Tom and set everyone straight once and for all. But the thought of Sophia's reaction made Charlotte's voice disappear somewhere deep inside her chest. She told herself that the only way to really defend Tom was to get the video and prove his bravery. But even knowing this did not make the queasy feeling going away. He's probably hoping Chase's family will get stationed at another post, Mari said, picking up her seltzer. I'm not sure that would even matter, Jen shrugged. Everyone calls him Sergeant Wimpy now. Charlotte wished Jen's family would get stationed at another post. I would too. He's kind of asking for it if he gets scared by a little thing like a worm in science, Sophia said. Charlotte gritted her teeth at this. Nothing had even happened yet, but here Sophia was, acting like Tom had already totally freaked out. Hey, what's up, Sister Wimpy? A boy called as he went past. Jen burst into giggles, and Charlotte sank down in her seat. It was getting worse, not better, as the days passed. The only thing that could help now was making that video. As the girls started in on Tom again, Charlotte promised herself they'd make it happen this weekend, no matter what. That afternoon, Charlotte decided to stop by the library after school and sent a quick text to Dad to let him know. She figured picking up a few new books would be a good distraction. And once she was there, she ended up sitting on a beanbag in the corner, rereading the first Harry Potter book, which was still her favorite. It was after 5 by the time she finally checked out a pile of books, stuffed them in her backpack, and headed outside. It was drizzling and foggy, so Charlotte pulled out her umbrella as she walked down the slick steps. She had outgrown her rain boots over the summer and could already feel the toes of her sneakers getting damp as she started down the path. Umbrellas were good for keeping the top half of you dry, but she was pretty sure the bottom of her jeans and her shoes would be wet by the time she got home. No one else was outside on such a nasty day. As Charlotte walked down the empty sidewalk and past the deserted playground, she slowly returned from the pleasant comfort of her book back in the real world. Her thoughts turned to the conversation over lunch. There was just no getting away from this whole Sergeant Wimpy thing, and Charlotte drew in a deep breath because coming toward her was a man, his steps haphazard and unmilitary like, his shoulders stooped. He was partly hidden in the fog, but Charlotte could see that he was wearing an old brown leather jacket, just like the man they'd seen at the house off Crimson Drive. Was it him? Charlotte slowed and glanced around. On one side of her was an athletic field, on the other, the post rec center, locked and closed for the night. The road was deserted, with no one in sight, no one but the man who was coming closer and closer. Charlotte's heart thumped heavily against her ribs, and she debated turning and sprinting for home. But then she gathered herself. This was an opportunity to uncover clues about what was going on in that building, even if it was a bit on the spooky side. Anything she noticed about the man could help them with their investigation. So Charlotte stood tall, in proper army style, straightened her umbrella, and strode toward him. The man looked to be in his late 40s with a weathered face and shaggy salt and pepper hair that grew longer than the military regulation. He was still unshaven and the coat was thick, much thicker than Charlotte had realized the day before. And it was made from canvas, not leather. But all of those details took a back seat when she finally got within a few feet of him. She'd been so busy looking at his face and coat that she hadn't noticed the most significant thing, the object he was holding in his hand. It was long like a baseball bat, made of solid wood with a loop of what looked like wire on the end. Charlotte wasn't sure what it was exactly, but it was obvious it could do real damage. Just the sight of it gave her the goosebumps. The man barely glanced at Charlotte as he passed. She kept her eyes forward, taking good deep breaths until she turned the corner. Then Charlotte ran home as fast as she could. So what do you think it was for? Tom asked in a hushed voice. It was cozy back home in her bedroom, but Charlotte still felt shivery, telling Tom and Rosie what had happened, what she had just seen. I know what it's for, Rosie nearly shouted. Today Victor and I did some detective work, and we figured out that the man at that house is dog-napping dogs. Buddy was his first victim, but now he has Pepper too. Charlotte momentarily forgot her frightening encounter as she glanced at Tom, unsure how to let Rosie know that her theory did not make sense. From the way Tom's forehead was crinkled, Charlotte could tell he was thinking the same thing. Um, I'm not sure that's what's going on, Charlotte said as gently as she could. Rosie scowled. Yes, it is. Well, why would he steal the dogs? Tom asked. Rosie paused. Clearly she didn't have an answer for this. And why would he need weapons and syringes? Charlotte added. If he was taking dogs, he could probably just lure them with toys or dog treats. Rosie was stumped by this too, and Charlotte hoped that meant she'd let this new and totally unrealistic theory go. What do you think that was, the thing the man was carrying when you passed him? Tom asked Charlotte, getting back to the matter at hand. Just the memory of it made Charlotte's heart beat a little faster. Maybe it was some kind of weapon to subdue the super soldier, she guessed. Tom nodded thoughtfully. That makes sense, he said, because if someone has extra powers, it could be hard to control them, especially if the experiment goes wrong and they turn out like the Hulk or something. Good point, Charlotte agreed. She didn't read comics, but everyone knew the Hulk was a pretty scary guy, and not someone you'd want running around the base. It's not the It's not for the super soldier, Rosie said crossly. She was leaning against her bed, Cupcake at her side, and her eyes flushed as she looked at her brother and sister. I told you that man is a dog napper, and he's trying to get more dogs. That weapon is in case anyone catches him trying to take their dog. Now her hand rested protectively on Cupcake, who took his who took this as an invitation for a belly rub, of course, and turned over, ready to enjoy a good scratch. And I bet he's going to hold those dogs for ransom or sell them for thousands of dollars. Charlotte looked at Tom and bit her lip. Obviously, Rosie was not going to let this go. Instead, she was going to come up with an even more outlandish theory to prove she was right. Holding pets for ransom is not exactly a moneymaker, Charlotte said again, trying to sound patient. And selling regular dogs isn't either, said Tom. Rosie pressed her lips together and glanced at them. Then he's doing something else with those poor dogs, she snapped, and we need to save them. Charlotte let out an impatient breath. Right now, we need to try to save Tom, she said. Next week, Chase is going to scare him with a worm and... Wait, what? Tom asked, his voice squeaky as he sat up straight. A worm? Charlotte was dismayed to see how panicked her brother appeared. Yeah, I heard about it at lunch, she said. Chase is going to spook you with one of the worms we dissect in science next week. Tom's face was getting pale. What if he surprises me and I do the research of doom at school? He whispered. Charlotte's breath caught in her throat. The terrible possibility had not occurred to her. But if anyone or But if anyone at Fort Patrick Middle School were to witness that screech, well, these past weeks would be nothing compared to what Tom would endure. Tom and Charlotte both. We have to get the video this weekend, Charlotte said firmly, or else. She could not finish the sentence, but when she saw the serious expression on her siblings' faces, she knew she didn't need to. They all knew what was at stake if they failed now. And that's the end of chapter 17. See you shortly for 18.